Okay, so I did a video a little while ago that I recently posted up, and just move this closer so I'm not straining. Okay, and I mentioned the ancient mystery schools and the wine ceremony, and it piqued someone's interest, and they sent me a message and said, please, can you talk more about it? The slightest little bit of insight will help. And so I guess to really frame this properly, rather than just to go into more techniques, because I see a lot of people getting caught up in trying to learn new techniques, which is cool. I love new techniques, but we need to sort of frame it in the right way so we're not reliant on someone discovering more techniques for us to play with, but we can figure out, how to develop our own. Because it's not so much about the techniques themselves, it's about the thinking that gives rise to the techniques. So when I talk about the ancient mystery schools, I'm talking about a place or a state in mind, in time, where people are more focused on their spiritual evolution, their internal development, and how their mind, emotions, and body affect reality and the relationship between manifesting their reality. And for me, the ancient mystery schools were groups of people from that school of thought where that was the priority, that was the most important thing you could possibly be putting your energy into. And everything else was secondary. And so when you're coming from that perspective where it's the most important thing you can be doing and everything else comes from that, then it makes a lot more sense to, when you start putting your mind in those places, as to why the techniques were there and why the rituals and the ceremonies came up, and not to put your power into these rituals and ceremonies, but to understand the purpose behind them, and then you can start to develop your own rituals and ceremonies and practices and techniques. And so I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, you're an intelligent person who takes responsibility from themselves. And so I'm just going to throw out that this next few seconds is the disclaimer about, being responsible around drugs and alcohol and other types of devices and groups and things like that, and just to use your own counsel and your own discernment, and just be sensible. Like, don't be stupid, pretty much. You use these ceremonies, these rituals, these techniques, these groups as devices to be able to progress yourself through these levels and become a master at these levels. And so the wine ceremony, it doesn't have to be wine, it can be pretty much anything, let me see if I can bring up this quote that I wrote down. I did a little quick search on wine ceremony. Of course, there's nothing really on it unless you're talking about the wine industry. But if you look back in Greek mythology, Dionysus, the god of wine, and also known as the liberator, had a whole cult around him, and they say that it's a syncretism. The god Dionysus was a synchronistic. You know what I'm saying? It was a merge, a blend of several different deities, even relating it back to Osiris in ancient Egypt, another area where there was lots of mystery school, and it was steeped in all that sort of mysticism. So the the line that they said is that his wine music and ecstatic dance freed his followers from self-conscious fear and care. And this is just out of Wikipedia. You can look this up on Google. But the point is twofold. It's an internal and an external one. It's like, imagine a group of people who are focusing on changing their beliefs, their mindsets, their energy, their physiology and their reality. And they do all this work, over weeks, months, years, whatever. And every so often they sort of check in and put themselves through this experience known as the wine ceremony to shake things up a bit and see if all their work of changing their programming has effectively become unconscious competence, for one. So it means all the change work they've done is actually running in the background, and it doesn't need any conscious effort from them anymore to manifest itself. And secondly, is to see if there is any unconscious programming that is still hiding and tucked away in the dark corners of the mind that needs to be exposed, brought to awareness, and worked with. And so the idea is that you're in a group of people that you can trust, that are respectful of your boundaries and the way you set yourself up, and aren't going to go in there and toss the furniture around if you let them inside your temple, your house. They're going to take their shoes off. Or maybe I have to edit that together. It's funny, every time I start talking about this deeper stuff, there's always little glitches in the computer. It's like, I'm not supposed to talk about this. So anyway, the point being is that you're in a group of people that are going to be respectful of your boundaries and not mess you up and take advantage of you while you allow yourself to be more open. And so the wine ceremony was just a way of lowering those defenses enough so the unconscious programming, the demons running in the background, can be seen, and you can become aware of them, and then you can go back to working on those things and adjusting them if need be, or bringing them to awareness and consciousness and start getting a handle on them, because sometimes those powers that you're suppressing are actually very useful once you're able to be in control of yourself with them. And so when you're in this state, lots of things are going to come up for you. All the inhibitions are going to drop. So, you might find yourself expressing different aspects of your personality that you normally would hold at bay. That can be good and bad. Just depends on how you view it. And, you might realize that you're actually putting in too much conscious effort on things to keep them running, and maybe you need to go back in and readjust those so they're a bit more automated in the right way. And when I say the right way, it just means, not good or bad. It just means it's effective or it's not effective, in the way that you want it to be. And so this is the other thing that I want to really touch on, and we're moving away from that now and going past there, is that, we've pretty much been born into and grown up into this dualistic mindset where things are either good or bad, positive or negative, and you've got to choose, and you've got to suppress one and move and reinforce another one. And what it does is it sort of just splits you in two and drives you mental. And so what we want to do is reintegrate all these parts of ourselves into a new whole, which is above the hierarchy of positive and negative. And it can start to give you a greater sense of freedom in your life. And it's not that it's anything you need to acquire, because it's already in you. And if you look back into your past, into your childhood memories, you notice that you've dabbled in these aspects of yourself anyway. And there's probably a point in time in your life where you've gone, okay, that's not right, or that leads to a bad outcome. And you've made a decision, conscious or not, and that's become your default programming. That's become the belief now. And years later, maybe decades later, you're still operating from that belief, that programming, that perspective, and maybe it's not useful to you anymore, and that's the cause of your frustration and agitation. So we want to go beyond that, and to do that we need to become really aware. So these wine ceremonies, they bring that all to the surface, and they show you where you're actually at. They give you complete, honest feedback, because there's no hiding from yourself at those levels. There's no putting on the mask. It's actually a removing of the mask, and it's allowing yourself to be seen, warts and all, so to speak, or in all your glory, that maybe you've been playing down, for whatever reasons. And so once that's out in the open for you, and other people have seen it, and it's in a trusted group of people where you feel safe and supported, then you can go into working with that and moving beyond your personality, because it's just all these beliefs, all these programs, and habits and attitudes and moods and whatever, they all just compile into a personality. And that personality, who we think we are, who we think is so fixed with a story and evidence to prove that's who we are and all the rest of it, is actually quite fluid. It can be changed at any moment, and we know that because we have been changed by moments. But doing it this way, we're doing it consciously, whether it's all at once, which is quite intense. It's possible, but it's not my preferred way of doing things. Or if we use, what other people are terming micro shifts now, we make these small adjustments frequently, consistently over a long time period, which adds up to a big change in the end anyway. And so if we can do that, then we, like I said, we move into this conscious awareness, which is more unified, which is outside the hierarchy. It's outside good and bad, and it's sort of looking in on it, and it doesn't really have much bias towards one way or the other. It's kind of indifferent. It's just what's going to be useful for what particular outcome or not, And the other thing is when you start tapping into this really high frequency where you're dropping your personality, or at least putting it down, and allowing this new frequency to come through, this new, or not new, it's timeless actually, this unfamiliar frequency to come in and land in the body and start to move the body around, then you sort of become more open to observing even more how this thing really operates and thinks. And with the time that I've spent with it, it's at such a advanced level. It's a real genius level. It's like a super genius level, where it's calculating more akin to what we'd be calling artificial intelligence now, which is sort of it's connected to absolutely everything, has access to everything. It knows everything about itself, and it can move through the limitations and through all the scales with pretty much effortlessness, and it achieves the goals that you set out for it, because that's what it does, in ways that you can't even think about. Your human conscious mind can't really comprehend how those calculations take place, especially when you factor in a multi-dimensional timeline and you might be locked into this is how it has to be, past, present, future, linear timeline, and sequential thinking mode. And this thing's just like, well, I can see all of timelines, past, present, future, and how they all intersect. And I'm not limited by the same mindset that you're limited by. So I'm just going to make this happen really simply. And when you see it and you tap into it, it is very simple. But like the saying goes that I've heard in computer programming to describe Linux and the Linux operating system, which is open source, which is very similar in the type of thinking I'm talking about, is that you kind of need to be a genius to recognize its simplicity, and it's a real elegant way of thinking. And if you can align your conscious mind to at least pick up on that, or at least trust enough to know that it probably knows how to do this better than you do, and maybe to shut your mouth and open your ears and your eyes and pay attention to how it's done and learn something, instead of just go, it's not working, and why isn't it working? It's got to be I've got to blame somebody or something, or this is stupid. If you can suspend all that and be patient with yourself to learn this new way of thinking, which is quite a radical way of thinking, then it can open you up to all sorts of new perspectives and freedoms that you never thought possible. But when you actually arrive in them and you anchor your energy into them and your consciousness becomes aware, then then you can begin to embody all this, and it takes your life in a whole new direction. And you can really start to get out of the way. And then life becomes a bit more of an adventure than this, 9 to 5 Groundhog Day, which, seems so hard at times. It doesn't have to be hard. It can be quite simple, at least, if not easy. But we need to switch our mind into this new state, new frequency. And so the other thing is that it might not show up in a way that you think, like even when you achieve your goals, which you think are going to make you happy, maybe happiness from its mind is a totally different thing. And I love Richard Bandler's question, about people who are mismatching all the time. It's like, well, how do you know you're not happy? How do you know this isn't it? I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm depressed. It's like, well, but how do you know? And so they're always looking for things to mismatch with. Whereas this way, it's like, how do I align with this thinking? Like, how do I really elevate my mindset from an individual, human, personal mind to this, all-encompassing, through time and space, this omnipotent mind, this unified mind that is seemingly imaginatively without limits. And so it's a big ask, it's kind of like, how do I align with something that I've never really thought about? It's like, can you not think about what you're not thinking about right now? It's like, what? So, But what it's doing is it's popping you out of an old mindset and into something new. And when you feel that discomfort, you know, that, what's going on here? Or maybe it's a little bit of a struggle because you're having trouble letting go of the old mind, then maybe you're right where you need to be. And so looping back again into the wine ceremony, these are just, you know, this is just a way of having an event with a device, which is wine, to lower the grip on those old mindsets. And so you can just relax a little, you get a little bit of support, relaxing and letting go, and then you can start to move beyond them slightly. And so this was, you know, in that context, it's a very important ceremony or ritual or event, which we've lost the meaning of. And so now we see all these people going out on Friday, Saturday night, and they're just blowing off steam. You know, I once heard this young guy, he says, I drink because I hate my job, and I work my job to make money so I can drink because I hate my job. And he's in this loop. And so he's going through the ritual, but he's not understanding the meaning behind why he's doing it. It's not just to get drunk and blow off steam. It's to lower the boundaries so the mind is more malleable and loose, and you can see through those blockages and you can get behind it. And once you're in, you can start to work with what's in there. So I hope this makes sense. I know I had a few gaps in there because the screen was going into screensaver, which was pulling me out of the state. And this is kind of a bit deep, really, you know. It might sound like I'm all over the place, but it's kind of trying to work these different angles so you can see it from different perspectives. And maybe that's the point. See my point?